I grew up with a learning disability. I felt like I didn't necessarily fit into the school system, and there was resistance towards the school system and questioning of it. It was towards the tail end of COVID that I was more reflective. I got very into journaling and meditation and started asking myself like bigger questions of if there were no rules or I didn't have any fear towards any of this, what would I do and how would I show up? This idea that natural equals better and that a synthetic ingredient is not good for you and it's not good for your skin is complete nonsense. You're not going to necessarily see the entire staircase as you're climbing up it. Consistently showing up for yourself day in and day out will get you far in life.
Portia Reinholz is the founder and creator of the skincare brand Chrysalis Cosmeceuticals. Originally going to college for business and communications, she has spent the last 6 years working for her father's construction company and started building her skincare company on the side about 2 years ago. Her exposure to entrepreneurship from a young age has helped her understand what is possible, and her lifelong passion for lotions and other potions led her to the decision to create her own skincare brand. Throughout the process of building this brand, she took an online course to learn about product formulation. About a year ago, she got in a car crash that forced her to take a step back with her brand. The sudden event postponed her original plans for launch, but ultimately shifted her mindset into a more thoughtful approach for the future. I'm thrilled to ask Portia about an industry I have absolutely no experience with and also hear her takeaways from her experiences of being around entrepreneurship growing up. Speaking with Portia was so lovely and educational regarding skincare in general and how she approaches starting a business. Stay tuned for the end of this episode for a little surprise that Portia has to share, aka a giveaway of her new products. I really like to ask people about like how their background affected where they are today. What do you think about your upbringing and background ultimately led you to your decision to start a skincare brand in terms of your experiences with school and jobs affect what you're working towards now with Chrysalis Cosmeceuticals? Cosmeceuticals, okay.
It's
Sorry.
a tricky one, and we'll get into the name later. But yeah, I think my background has had a huge influence on the decisions I make and who I am, and I think it does for everyone. So I grew up with a learning disability, and that's important because I felt like I didn't necessarily fit into the school system, and there was resistance towards the school system and questioning of it. I also grew up with an entrepreneurial father, so I watched him create his own systems, and in addition to, he criticized the school system. So I think that duality makes you question things and not just go with the flow and follow a linear path necessarily, and to know that there is more out there if you're not happy with the system and to create what you want to have in this reality. My upbringing also, I got to see the work ethic and the drive that it takes to be able to get a company off the ground and to manage it and to scale it. So it's been an eye-opening experience without a doubt, and has 100% made me not intimidated to try, and made it feel as though it's possible, you know? I have half of his DNA, so if it's possible for him, it's possible for me.
Yeah, I really relate to what you said. My brother studied computer science, and I knew that if they could do it, I could, even though it was like really intimidating. And then also the part you said about you were brought up in an environment where it was natural to question the natural flow of things. I feel like that's really important because it can be really hard to get out of that if you don't have examples of people who have been like, this is not for me, traditional schooling, and then you get a job and then that kind of thing.
Right. I think that plays a huge role. It's having an example of it, and then also to just questioning authority in a way too. I had a teacher in second grade tell me that I was never going to amount to anything. And I came home and I told my parents this, and they made me in second grade go back to that teacher and tell her that's not true. And it was a whole big confrontation, which I was so scared as a little second grader to do this. So it's definitely been instilled from a young age to not just accept what is showing up and to have an influence on what's going on in your life and to furthermore demand it of you.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
is insane. What are you doing telling children that? What?
She shouldn't be a teacher, really, but
What?
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad. Good for you. That is quite scary.
It was very scary, but at the end of the day, I wasn't going to go home and say that I didn't confront her, you know? That was
Yeah,
more scary.
yeah. What sort of things were involved in the process of coming out with your own line of skincare products? What has the process been like getting to where you are today, from learning to create it, understanding which products, thinking about branding, manufacturing, everything? And maybe in addition to this question, just a background on your relationship with skincare in general.
It's been quite a journey launching a company, and there's been many highs and lows that come with it. I first saw the company in a meditation, so I visually saw the bottles and felt very connected and aligned with it. I have been obsessed with skincare since I was young, not even just skincare, all cosmetics. I like vividly remember the first time I went into Sephora. I was like, loved it, absolutely loved it. So there's always been a fascination with lotions and potions and this questioning of the traditional system and understanding that I can create what it is that I want to see in the world. And I it was during COVID, it was towards the tail end of COVID that I was more reflective. We all had like more time alone, and I used it to reflect. I got very into journaling and meditation and started asking myself like bigger questions of what if there were no rules or I didn't have any fear towards any of this, what would I do and how would I show up? And it just felt completely aligned to try and launch a skincare company. In terms of more, that's like the initial idea of it, and then there's been rendition after rendition of it. I'm a perfectionist at times, and I care about what I'm doing, so I want the best product that I can possibly produce. And like I said, I'm not following necessarily a system. I am kind of blazing my own trail. I don't have investors or anything, so I don't have anyone lining out the order of anything. So there's been a lot of trial and error in terms of how do you find the manufacturers and am I getting a good deal or am I getting ripped off here? In terms of the formulations themselves, there's lots of different ways that you can launch a product, and you can very easily just stick a label on a bottle and go and market it. But that didn't necessarily feel like it was my company. You know, I was just remarketing something. So I got really curious about the formulations and into the science of all of it. But yeah, there's been multiple different waves of it. Branding and the packaging came first, and the name of the company, Chrysalis Cosmeceuticals. Rachel, who you know, is the one who came up with the name Chrysalis because Chrysalis, for those of the viewers that don't know what it is, it's a butterfly cocoon, and the products are transformative in nature. So it felt fitting that you get in your little chrysalis and you come out a butterfly, and that's been the backbone of a lot of the branding, down to the packaging that you pull out a little chrysalis and then you open up the butterfly bottle. The cosmeceutical portion of the name comes from there's pharmaceuticals, cosmeceuticals, and cosmetics. So there's different grades of skincare and its effectiveness.
Okay, love that. I love the butterfly analogy.
I've been obsessed with butterflies forever too, so it definitely feels aligned again. A lot of this, the creation of the company has been like an authentic expression of who I am, and which also makes you more vulnerable because you're really like putting yourself out there. It's
Mm.
not me making a calculation of I think a pink bottle will do best because I'm marketing to women. So it feels much more aligned and authentic, which makes it scarier to launch.
I think that's so good because I feel like the best chance you have at success is something that only you can create, I think that will be very lovely. But I was also wondering, with something like skincare, how do you plan to market it or tell your story? Or is there a specific impact that you're trying to have with the product that you're creating?
Marketing has actually been way harder than I would have anticipated. The impact that I want the brand to have, I feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there on the internet about skincare and what does work, what doesn't work, and it's pretty easy to just slap on a filter and say, my skin transformed, which is frustrating, and it leads people to feel like it's not working for them or they're the problem, and it's just this whole spiral. So, the brand, I wanted to be very science driven and research based to bring results and to actually help people with the skin issues that they have identified. There's also the greenwashing element of it that I want to bring forward. I feel like there's been a bunch of brands who get out there and say, this ingredient's bad, this ingredient's bad. And it's kind of nonsense. It's a marketing ploy, and that really frustrates me. It's part of the misinformation that's out there right now. And with a lot of the communications that I'm developing, I want to bring some clarity to the conversation, not confuse people, and bring results for their skin. For example, back to the greenwashing thing, this idea that natural equals better and that a synthetic ingredient is not good for you and it's not good for your skin. Complete nonsense. Think about it. Poison ivy is a naturally occurring chemical. It's not good for your skin. Do not put that on your skin. It's not going to go well. Something like a hyaluronic acid, while it's in your skin, they're making that in a lab. And it's the effect that it has on your skin is way better than a natural ingredient. So it's not about natural versus not or any of that kind of like blanket one size fits all narrative. It's research. There's a science to skincare. There's a science to the formulations, and we don't need to be confusing people just to make money. And people shouldn't have to be a cosmetic chemist to be able to figure this out. I think it's ridiculous, and it's a shame.
Okay. I've never thought about it like that, and that's a good point. But on that note, I'm curious if people are arguing about certain brands that might be bad or the manufacturing process is bad for the environment. Do you know what that looks like in the skincare world? What sort of chemicals or things that go into skincare are bad versus good for not just our skin, but in our bodies maybe, but like the environment or something like
Yeah,
that?
definitely from an environmental standpoint, anything with a silicone in it is bad for the environment because it does not break down. So you can put it on, it feels so buttery, it gives like the best looking makeup and whatnot. But when you're washing it away, it doesn't break down in the water systems. So it's kind of like washing like a plastic down the drain every single time, and if everyone's using them, it's a pollution, most definitely. So I would avoid silicones at all costs. They do have natural alternatives. And just in terms of brands that I would think are bad, would be lower end brands because they don't have the room in their budget. If you're trying to formulate with the environment in mind, with ethics in mind, it's going to cost a little more. It's just there's no way around it. So if you're consistently getting low dollar skincare and whatnot, there's stuff and there's fillers in it. There's not room in the budget for them to pack a punch and to really be thoughtful with the formulations.
Okay, that makes total sense. I'd love to ask you a bit more about the program that you took for learning about formulation, like why you decided to do a program, what program was it, how do you think it helped you with how you're coming up with your formula for your skincare, and then also on that note of when you're just starting out, you might have limited resources. How do you handle the approach to trying to be on the more sustainable side of things?
I might get lost in this one. Let's break it up. The thought process of going to get the degree and then being sustainable
Mm-hmm.
right? So the thought process behind going back to school was rooted in not wanting to just slap my label on a bottle of skincare that I didn't know what it did, how it worked, what was really in it. I needed to know the science behind all of it to be able to feel comfortable putting my name behind it. And it was an investment, both like time and money. It just felt like the right thing to do, and I am going to see the money come back at one day. In terms of the second part of the question, if you could remind me a little bit, it's being eco-friendly and also resourceful.
Yeah, because you're starting out and you're probably investing your own resources,
Mm-hmm.
just like you mentioned about the lower end brands who don't have room in their budget to afford that extra step. How do you kind of approach that problem?
So approaching that, I can't necessarily go all out and just order
Mhm.
high-end ingredients, but I'm getting the absolute best that I can. And I'm doing the manufacturing myself, so I'm not doing a third party with it. That helps keep costs down. And that program that I did taught me how to run a clean room and everything, because there can be problems with brands that, and then there's mold in the product, or they don't know how to make it stable for shelves. And I think more than anything, what's really helped me is just taking the time. So I feel like there's three main resources when starting any kind of venture: is time, money, and space. Those are your three resources. And because I don't have investors or anything, I can take as much time as I want and approach it as strategically as possible to be able to keep the cost down and still deliver the absolute best products that I can. And I also have to keep in mind the brand promise of the cocoa level of ingredients. So it's just taken more time more than anything,
Yeah.
and having to be very bootstrap strategic about all of it, thinking through the different options and weighing them and going through what is the best for me and the company.
Yeah. So, how do you view then starting this business? And how has it been balancing it with your job?
Mm-hmm.
Do you view this business as a risk? Do you view it as a long term commitment that you hope to grow for the next 5 to 10 years? Do you view it as like a risk or maybe an investment in yourself or following a calling that you can't ignore?
I think all of the above. It's definitely a risk, and I have to balance it without a doubt. And I have to be more cognizant of my time and energy than before, because I have to be able to balance the job responsibilities with also creation of the company on the side. So it's a risk. I'm putting my time, energy, effort into it. I am not necessarily balanced in terms of my life right now, and I know that won't be forever, and I'm willing to make that sacrifice at this point in time, and I'm willing to do so because I see myself doing this forever. I feel so passionately about the products in the industry that it's gonna be around for as long as I'm around.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's not just one, is it? It's like all of those things.
Yeah, I think all of them apply. It is a risk, and it's also a calling, and it's going to be here hopefully for a very long time. I would love for
Yeah,
me to be like 80 years old still running Chrysalis.
that would be amazing. Was there ever a time in your job that you have now where you hadn't started this yet and you were unfulfilled or unhappy and you were thinking about this, but you were like, it was just a thought and nothing more?
I don't think I had a very long period of that. I went to work for my dad's company, and that was an incredible experience to be able to see the day in, day out of how to run a successful company, how to manage people, how to scale a company. So, all very invaluable. It just is in the construction space, and I'm a pretty feminine woman. So it felt like that was the perfect opportunity for me to expand my business skills. In terms of the period of the idea of it towards getting into action, there wasn't much lag. I didn't spend a ton of time thinking about it and not also trying to do something in action actively.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's probably a better way to do it too for all entrepreneurs listening, is to just jump in and start. Be mindful of the risks that you're taking and don't overextend yourself or do anything you're going to regret later on, but just start. Don't let it stay as an idea. I also think too, having the people around me that I have, they all supported the idea in different ways. That everyone was like rooting for me, thought it was possible. They would ask follow up questions of where are you at with all of this and whatnot. So I think keeping in mind of what responses you're getting from people and whether or not they're helping push you towards where you want to go. I
Yeah.
don't know if I just answered that question or not.
No, that's great. I think I'm asking because it's something that I experience sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a really unpleasant experience of you want to do something, but you don't have a lot of time,
Mm-hmm.
and it can just feel really, not to be dramatic, but like torturous. Like I wish I could use all my time
Yeah.
towards this thing,
Yeah.
but realistically, you need to pay for life and so it's a slower burn.
Yeah,
Um,
it's definitely a slower burn for me.
yeah.
And I think I like the approach that you're taking too with the podcast and being able to talk with entrepreneurs and hearing their stories. I don't think you're 100% sold on it being fashion, are you?
Not necessarily, but similarly to you, fashion is, I think, has been an interest for my entire life. And I take that as a sign that that's what I want to be involved in when I do start an actual company. I say something like that. I'd love to start a brand or a company one day. The podcast is a different kind of thing, but I do dream of starting something one day, and I think it would be in fashion.
It's fun to have dreams. I
Yeah.
feel like, in terms of action steps for you to make you feel like you're getting somewhere in not just like the dreamland, but in reality, would be to start identifying what would the clothing look like. You could start working through who would the audience be, how would you connect
Mm,
with them, and then you could start figuring out some of the manufacturing and whatnot from there. And
yeah.
two, in the fashion space right now, I know there's companies that you can make one garment, photograph it, put it up, and then as the orders come in, the manufacturers get a notice, so you don't even have to carry the weight of the
Mhm.
inventory on you, which is
Yeah.
incredible. So yeah, I think just start playing with, do you have ideas for what you would want the garments to look like?
I do. Thanks for asking. I think I'm also still torn about whether it should even be clothing or like maybe a product that fashion brands would use. I think maybe this will be applicable to you, but it's like I would love to create clothes, but there's so many clothes out there. I'm like, how do I add to it? How do I have my unique spin? And I wonder, have you ever had those?
Yeah, definitely. And I've also similarly been trucking down my path and been like, wait, I feel like I should do something more business to business within the
Yeah.
cosmetic space too. But I think those answers come to you as you go along too. You're not going to necessarily see the entire staircase as you're climbing up it. And people get further if they just are continually taking steps towards the direction that they want to go. And then more information gets revealed to you too. So Rosie today doesn't have all the information of Rosie 5 years from now. There's
Mm-hmm.
going to be quite a difference. And no matter what, you're going to be happy that you started.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah. You never gonna have, it's never gonna be all green lights.
Yeah.
You should expect setbacks, they're going to happen. And a lot of this process has been getting to know myself and understanding myself better. There's so much more required out of you if you're starting your own thing. You have to be much better at time management, much better with boundaries. So you cultivate a deeper understanding of who you are, what you want, and learning to show up consistently every day in alignment with those goals.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like just managing another thing and then a full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
it just like forces you, like you're saying. to evaluate almost every aspect of your life if you are
Hmm.
aiming to be successful and grow as fast as possible, because everything in your life will affect the growth rate of that. So,
Also, too, for you, it might be useful to try to find, and maybe don't have to be like exactly what you're looking for, but they could have elements of like someone who is really good at time management, someone who's really good at outsourcing stuff. So, like with the podcast, could you outsource the editing and just
working on it.
continually trying to figure out how to take things off your plate so you can put new things on your plate and take on more and do more and be more.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. And I think like it can be scary with the investment because I feel like those
Mm-hmm.
things will cost much, like more. But then at
Yeah.
the same time, you're limiting yourself if you are always doing the same tasks as because you it will never grow if you are just stuck with that like base. Like for example, 5 hours of editing a week. I have to go through that before I get to enhancement. So
Right.
I agree.
And just in terms of, oh, when you do or if you do make the switch to getting people to help you with different aspects of it too, just putting the expectation out there that there might be a little bit of a bumpy start to it because finding the right people is a skill set of its own. And managing the right people is a skill set of its own, especially too when you're in a startup and you don't necessarily have the funds to go and pay someone a great amount of money to be able to handle this task in its full capacity. Just pre-warning, there,
Yeah.
if you sent this off to be edited by someone, I guarantee you're not going to absolutely love it because they're not doing it the way you would want it to be done.
Mhm.
And learning how to work with people on that and find the right people. Yeah, that's a whole other skill.
Yeah, it reminds me of your advice earlier that you should expect setbacks. I think that's a much better approach. Even comparing it to saving money, which is a new journey of mine, expect things to not go exactly as you would anticipate. It's so easy to like overestimate sometimes, I think. So that's something I've been learning as well, and I think it's really helpful with entrepreneurship because it's such an unknown road. But speaking of that, so I wanted to ask you about how your journey was affected last year after you got in a car accident and kind of experienced the shift in life, momentum, energy, your goals with a brand. Just like what that experience was like for you.
So yeah, speaking of setbacks, no one plans for a car accident, and I was gearing up to launch and got in a car accident, and it made just keeping my responsibilities at my job difficult to do. So I had no other choice really but to sit back and heal and to postpone the launch, which caused a lot of inner turmoil because it was like all I ever wanted to do, and it felt like it was being ripped away from me. So I had to just focus on my health and focus on becoming stable and able to even work a full day. And once I got a little more healed and stable, I began trying to find how to make lemonade out of the lemons. Because I believe everything happens for a reason. We don't always understand it or like it in the moment, but to be able to take something that you don't necessarily like and to find a way to turn it into something that's useful for you is, I think, a key skill in entrepreneurship. I just essentially I went back to the drawing board with Chrysalis. I've redone the labels, I've redone the formulations, I'm targeting multiple skincare types, and I've enhanced the marketing side of it. Before, if I were to have launched, I would have launched with just 3 products, and it would have been to one skin type, and that would have been it. And not to say that wouldn't have worked or I wouldn't have had some success with it, but I do feel like now it's much more solid. And it took a car accident for me to take a step back and to slow down too. I feel like before I was just go trying so hard to get everything done quickly and in a reasonable budget, and the universe said no, 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 sit down.
Yeah.
You gotta think about this more.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there is a reason for that one day and you'll look back and you'll be like, okay,
Right.
yeah.
Hopefully, I'm hoping there's some kind of good that comes out of it. Reason for it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make the lemonade. We've got better labels now, so
So when is your official launch?
there isn't an official launch date. I have got the stills. I love them, and I love that build out.
What
I'm
does
now
stills mean? You mean pictures of the...
pictures, still images. I'm happy with the quality of the still images now, and I am happy with the narrative of the marketing. Right now, I'm just working on video. Videos feels like a different animal, and I'm not necessarily liking the quality of them or how they're reading and whatnot. So as soon as I get those to communicate on the same level that the stills are at or the same level that the formulations are at is when I'll launch.
Okay.
Yeah.
What sort of things have you outsourced or do you handle it all alone?
No, I don't handle it all alone. I would lose my mind. I outsource the editing. I outsource some of the video stuff. What else? I feel like that's all I've been really working on is the marketing stuff. And I don't think it's smart to outsource the narrative of the marketing. I think you could do that, but I think the brand would lose some of the personality, or there would be a disconnect between the narrative and what the branding is. And maybe I don't know if I could afford someone full time to work on the narrative and to really understand the brand, that would be different, but that's not the situation I'm in. So,
Mm.
narrative is most definitely done by me, and I have help with some of the other stuff with it. And Fiverr is a great resource for trying to find resources. They have all kinds of different things.
I was just gonna ask you, yeah, like where do you find people to do these
Mm-hmm.
things? And
Also in my network too, Rachel has helped with some of the branding. She did some of the design stuff. She did the name and whatnot. So it's a combination of just your connections and network, and then also figuring out people online.
yeah. So how do you handle, I guess, what's your approach to content creation or getting the word out on socials? Or are you thinking about sending your stuff to people to have them post about it? Or how do you think about all that stuff? I know you've spoken about scheduling content
Mm-hmm.
and making that yourself.
So the content flow, I'm trying to find what works for me and works with my schedule because I still have a full-time job. So that's not necessarily nailed down. I am trying to batch content. And so for the stills, I have 60 stills just on deck ready to go. I'm wanting to batch the videos as well. So there's been a lot of me like typing up the narratives of all of it and flushing it out, then getting on camera saying it, seeing how it works and whatnot. It's been just trial and error trying to figure out how to do it, and then what does the timing look like for it, best days to do it. Usually it's weekends. I have the free day to be able to try and get some content done, and then there are little tricks like you can schedule out posts in advance so you don't necessarily have to be on the apps all the time, because that would just be too much for me to handle at this
Yeah.
point, at least.
Do you schedule them yourself or do you use a third party service to schedule them?
You schedule them in, you would go on your computer and you would log in to the application and you schedule it from on your computer. So there's like
Hmm.
how most people use the applications on their phone. And then they also have a back end, so to speak. For TikTok, it's TikTok Creator Shop, I think. And then for Instagram, Facebook, it's Meta, and they have all kinds of different things in there. And that's been, you can get very lost in the sauce in terms of trying to figure out the back end of it. I also have been very fortunate to have some connections in the back end world of people that can steer me if I'm not clear on how to do something or if it's worth it to even try to do that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I feel like I see a lot of brands blow up on TikTok or maybe Instagram or something through Reels. And I feel like social media can really help a lot with growth and getting the word out about your brand, and then brand story. If there's a really strong brand vibe or social media marketing, I'm more inclined to, you know, purchase that product.
Right.
I'm more intrigued. It might take a couple taps of me seeing it, but then, so I think about that with a podcast, but it's almost, there's so many messages about what you can do to create a viral reel or like a TikTok or like
Right.
all this stuff. So, how do you manage that? Do you get overwhelmed at all? Or do you follow a certain approach?
I get overwhelmed all the time. All the time
What?
with this. I get
Okay.
overwhelmed all the time with this. But on that note, I do feel like there's all these tips and tricks, and it feels like they pull you a million different ways. And I think, regardless of any of that, if you can sit down by yourself and create genuine, authentic content, it's going to go so much further. I'm not paying attention to trends. I'm not paying attention to the new viral trick or anything. I'm only focused on providing quality content and information for the skin types that I'm going to have products for. I think less noise in your ears sometimes is better when it comes to that. Some of it you need, and to be able to decipher between the two is difficult sometimes, and I haven't been perfect at it by any means. And a lot of it just comes from gut instinct. That's just how I feel is right for me to launch this kind of product. Now, if I was launching a color cosmetic, I think the strategy would be completely different. So for skincare, it's much more informational because you don't see something after just putting it on once that you do with a color product. So I think having an understanding of what it is you're selling and what it is that the customer would need to know, and specifically in the skincare space, I'm having like an internal debate about how much information do you even provide? Do people want to know the nitty gritty details of all of it, or is that overwhelming for them? Am I not explaining it in a way that would make any sense to anyone? So it's just trial and error and like a gut feeling.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's also comforting to hear. Yeah.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they're all human. They don't know what they don't know, and they're just trying. They're showing up consistently. They have fear, they have doubts, they have anxiety. Everyone experiences the full range all the time.
Yeah, I think it's easy to forget that when you, especially when you get on social media and you see people's finished product and everything they've already done, but it's really easy to not understand all the work that's gone in behind the scenes, all the money that they've probably invested, all the time that they've maybe wasted doing the wrong thing, but they haven't really wasted. It just took them time to get there. I think I really try to learn and it like expose, or I guess the details of people's stories with this podcast, because sometimes it looks so glamorous from the outside, but in reality they've gone through their own struggles as well. And I feel if anything it just encourages people who might look at something and be like, oh, I can't do that, it's like too much work, I'm not cut out for it. But then you hear those same doubts from other people who have
Mm-hmm.
done something, and it's just like more encouraging, you
Well, the
know?
grass is always greener. So you always look at someone else and you're like, the grass is greener on their side. It never is. And yeah, just consistently showing up for yourself day in and day out will get you far in life. And for me, reeling it back to skincare, just taking the moment in the morning and night to show up for myself and nurture myself just creates a positive domino effect in my life.
Yeah, it does take time.
It absolutely does. It's this, when I first started this, I thought I could have it done in 6 months, which is absolutely bonkers. It's taken way longer than that, and I had to go through my own emotional process of feeling like I'm a failure because I don't have it done yet, and I'm never going to make it if I can't do this. There's all kinds of negative self talk that everyone has. And I think just I don't want to give like this advice of just keep going because you do also need to have the social, I don't know if it's a social awareness, but you need to have the awareness of if something isn't working or if something isn't aligned, you need to be able to identify that and to find what is aligned and what is going to work. I think just you have to go off your gut feeling of it, of the balance between showing up consistently towards a goal and knowing when you need to pivot because there's lots of pivots in the startup entrepreneurial space.
Yeah, it can be tricky for sure. But one thing I want to ask you as well is what would you say are your top goals with Chrysalis? Maybe regarding where do you aim to sell it one day? Do you aim to have it in Sephora or maybe just on your website? Or what kind of people do you really want to help? Or just anything like that. I think I also asked because it's an interesting process, even forming goals, I
Mm-hmm.
think, when you're starting out. So I'm curious about how people set them for themselves to the point where it's not too aggressive, where it feels unrealistic, but it's still optimistic, you know?
So this is something that I have struggled with. I am notorious for setting really big goals that are like incredibly hard to achieve and then getting really down on myself when I don't achieve them. And it's something that I've learned about myself through the process of creating this and that I've had to reel in. So like when I first started, I had all these big goals of all these things and a lot, and I've really had to focus and reel myself in and just focus on launching the social media part of it, selling on the website, connecting with the customers. So, yeah, I've taken some of the big things that are further out just off my plate, out of my mind, and focusing within the next 6 months, like 6 month periods.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, you know how people always talk about a 5 year plan and how you should have a 5 year plan, blah, blah, blah. Someone, I forget who told me this, but if you think back to yourself 5 years ago, what was your life like and what did you think your life was going to be like in 5 years? And how much more information have you gotten throughout the time period? Myself 5 years ago did not think I wanted to have this company, none of that. So I couldn't have planned for any of this. So I think throw out the 5 year plan, throw it out. It's not useful, it's not realistic. More information is going to come, there's going to be twists and turns, and I think by being so stuck on a 5 year plan that you're going to miss the opportunities that are showing up in your life right now.
Yeah. Yeah, oh my gosh, I completely agree. And it makes me think of like, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know who you're going to meet, how
Right.
they could help you, what sort of opportunities are out there that could absolutely easily come up. And yeah, I think about the podcast like this. I didn't even listen to podcasts 5 years ago. I started
Right.
listening a year ago. But I just think it's so true. If you set a goal when you know less, and the world also is changing at such a fast rate,
That's a great.
and like how businesses grow and all this stuff, and it's just having that in your mind kind of hold you to it, maybe even subconsciously, unless you like consciously be like, oh, this no longer makes sense. And so I feel like that can limit you. So I think that's a
Mhm.
great point.
Also, too, I do monthly inventories of my life. So once a month, I sit down and I look at what all has gone on, what's coming in, what do I need to cut out, what's not making sense anymore. And it's a practice. And it not only makes you more aware and grounded in this moment, but it also helps further you down the path that you're supposed to be going on.
Yeah. Wow, that's a good practice.
I can send you the questions that I asked myself if you want. I
Thank
journal
you.
them out. I journal them out.
Okay. Please do. I think that's a really good practice because so much changes, you know?
And the unexpected happens.
Yeah, definitely. What sort of things, reflecting now on how far you've come with this, what sort of things would, or just one thing if you want, would you do differently knowing what you know now?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I would have gone to school first, most definitely. I didn't do that correctly, the ordering of that. but I also wasn't sure in that moment if that was the pathway for me to launch a product and if it would have made more sense to work with a manufacturer. I think it would have, knowing what I know now and knowing that it's true that I needed to get into the science of all of it, I would have gone to school first and I would have taken some of the pressure off of myself. I feel like I put way too much pressure on myself to have it all together way too quickly. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Slowing down, education first.
Yeah. What is the name of the program that you did?
It's called the Institute for Personal Care Science, or might be just personal care. It's out of Australia. It was like an incredible program. This lady, Belinda, runs it, and she can break down the science behind all of it so easily. I also
Okay.
grew up in San Diego. A lot of my education was more in the science space, so maybe I was pre prepped for that. But I do
Hmm.
feel like she does an incredible job.
Okay, good to know. I'll probably link that as well for anyone who's curious. And then I feel like you have given a lot of helpful guidance. So maybe what piece of advice would you give to a skincare entrepreneur or someone who's interested in creating skincare or just getting started in that space?
I think just start.
Yeah.
Just start. Get very clear with yourself and what it is that you're wanting to create and why you're wanting to create it. And just start down the path of bringing it into reality. The first step is the clarity of it, of what is it, and defining all of that. And the next, literally physically getting it into reality.
Okay, I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Portia. This has been lovely and very educational, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. And for any of the listeners who would like a free bottle at launch, go over to the Chrysalis Cosmeceuticals Instagram and DM me the name Rosie. I'll send you a link, and at launch, you'll get a little notification and send you a free bottle.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I
Yeah,
will link
thank
the
you.
website in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
Thank you for listening to Passion Project Pending. If you have any feedback on the show or you or someone you know would like to be interviewed about your passion project, please head to my website, passionprojectpending.com, to leave feedback or submit an application to be interviewed. I'd love to learn about your business. And I'm talking any sort of feedback. You don't like the way I speak? Let's hear it. You think I say that was really educational too much? I want to hear it. The good, the bad, the inevitably ugly. Thank you so much.